Hey, Bobby Manning here. Welcome to a Friday edition of the Garden Report. Dart Adams is here. Red
It,
everywhere. Dart, it's been a year. It's been an off season. Always enjoy talking Celtics with you. And I want to get your vibe on this team. How you're feeling about it, how you felt about the off season, how things look going forward. But we do have a little bit of news this afternoon. We'll kick around first. Jaylen Brown's back in Boston. Attended a court refurbishing in Dorchester. Did a short speech. Made an appearance out there. He was in New York on ABC News last night. Been busy out in Spain, obviously, which is what initially held up extension talks. Now it sounds like they're going to get going again next week. But this is obviously the big story in Celtics land right now is Brown and the extension talks. And it's a little strange. There's been a lot of reporting that said this is normal. This isn't any concern here. But we're now almost all the way through July, 3 weeks since he's been eligible to extend, and not a ton of momentum here. So how have you felt about this whole saga, if we want to call it that?
um, I've just been seeing Celtics fans panic, and I'm sick of hearing them panic about everything, whine and cry about everything. Jaylen Brown's about to sign what may be the richest NBA contract ever for this small time frame before everybody else becomes eligible and does it. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be hashed out before this contract gets signed. That we're dealing with this new deal that happened, the CBA and all this other stuff that happened before, incentives, all these other things. How are we going to sign this deal? How much money is it going to be? Is it going to leave wiggle room to do other things for the Celtics? There's a lot involved in this contract, right? And I feel as though Celtics fans wanted this to be over soon so it could be signed so they can be comfortable. And Celtics fans always want to be comfortable. They 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 wring their hands a lot. They're always nervous about the other dropping, and it's annoying to me. I'm about to turn 48 in August. When I read how long this new deal was with the salary cap and everything involves in taxes, and and then on top of that, you're dealing with the new system of now you're signing for the max. He was all NBA. You know, there's so much going on. And then the thing is that we're gonna have to deal with somebody else coming up. That like when I look at the pieces, they signed Porzingis the way they did for a reason. They traded Grant when they did and did the sign and trade for Grant for a reason. All of these things are made it so you can shift stuff around so we can handle Jaylen. It's going to take the time it takes. I'm not concerned about it. I'm not worried about it. I'm more thinking about how's this team forming into shape, coming into the offseason because we're not done. And I think a lot of people are mistaken about this Celtics team and what it's going to look like when the season finally starts. We're not done. There's still a lot of things we have to move around. The Jaylen situation is the next thing to handle, and then we can get back into business.
Yeah, and I started thinking about that a couple of days ago. What this whole offseason means for Jaylen. I also think the deal is going to get done. It just makes too much sense on both sides for Brown to get the money, for the Celtics to get that control long term. Whether they're committed to him or not, that's a bonus on both ends for them. So I guess it's probably tax. I guess it's probably some level of protection on both ends holding this up. I think the latest thing being kicked around is the player option, which makes a lot of sense to me, as well as the trade kicker and things that just sort of make it a varying level of difficulty to move him going into the future there. You can't get a no trade clause, of course. I don't think after this Bradley Beal saga that anyone would get one anyway, even if he was eligible for one. But it definitely just seems to be some tinkering here, and it's going on a little long in my mind, but I think it will get done. And
There's so much involved.
there
There's
is
there's so
with tax
many.
specifically.
Yeah, there's so much that has to be hashed out with this deal, and taking their time with it. is the smart thing to do. It's the common sense thing to do. Is it taking longer than fans would like? Of course, but that's life. Just like when any Celtics fans should understand over what's happened over the last 2 years, things don't go the way you think they will.
Yeah, and I guess the thing is, for most guys in this position, it is sort of just boom, done. It's the super max. There's no incentives. There's no if this or that. That's the player option. Most guys get the player option. So the hand wringing does say a little something about his situation here. I just wonder how both sides view each other at this point, because we know through the interviews there was some resentment on Brown's end from last summer and how that went down with the Durant saga.
I
I'm
mean,
sure I'm sure there's probably some legitimate worry given the comments and everything else on the Celtics end about how committed he is to Boston long term. And we know in this new dynamic, pretty much anyone can get out of their situation no matter how many years are left on their term, no matter how good the situation looks. So I think that's probably a small part of it too, is just the slightest distrust on both sides that exists here. And again, Brown's talked about this, and I wish it wasn't there. I think it'd make it easier to progress into the future. And I have to think that's part of why Porzingis is here too. Obviously he's a guy who really solidifies this core, and we'll get to him in a minute. But he's also another all-star caliber guy who's signed long term now, who's able to play alongside Tatum, who solidifies this core no matter what happens going forward with Brown here. I think you want all three, but it's also going to be, as you said, very expensive to keep all these guys under the new CBA. So there's a lot that goes into this, really. And it's tough. I think we all think the deal's going to get done, but it's tough to, I think, say definitively whether Brown's going to be here for a long time.
I mean, we never know that ever.
Yeah.
This is a new era for the league. I mean, I was talking to somebody about this. When I was growing up, players had their numbers retired with the team. They were with the team for a long time. Players move around so much now, and they have power they didn't have before, which I don't have a problem with. That if they can advocate for themselves, they can have leverage. God forbid, these players have any type of agency or autonomy. No, we don't want to see that. What? So Jaylen Brown being apprehensive is the intelligent thing to be. Jaylen Brown holding the team accountable for not handling things the way they should have is the smart way to be. We've had discussions about, there was the stretch of time when it looked like they were going to trade people for AD, and when Danny Ainge went out, said publicly that he was angling to sign AD when he was still had 2 more years under his contract in New Orleans.
Yeah, and Jaylen was part of that whole era too.
Exactly, and everybody was there. So everybody sitting in that locker room like, wait a minute. So you mean to tell me that if they ask for me, I'm out the door, but you're saying that I'm the future of this franchise? So you start there, where the talk of players being assets and not players, not parts of, not a part of the team going forward, not the future of this franchise, assets. Because at the end of the day, basketball, the NBA is a business. And Jaylen is very aware of that, as is Jason. And when you see how Jason and Jaylen are like, weighed against each other, I look at them as the duo that we never got because we had Len Bias pass away before he became a Celtic. And unfortunately, we're approaching the 30th anniversary of losing Reggie Lewis. We never got that duo. We never got to see those players develop as young players and go through all the different stages, right? We're getting that with the Jays. And I just feel like the Celtics fans are so blinded by almost winning the championship in 2022 and feeling like they should have done more, forgetting the field and who was actually winning championships and who was ahead of them this whole time, and their ages, 26 and 27. That they're missing the forest for the trees.
Well, it's interesting.
Jaylen will be under contract. Jason will be under contract. And we'll talk about Porzingis later. But there's so much involved with Jaylen Brown making the Boston Celtics kind of suffer during this agonizing, grueling negotiation. He should do it. He should hold their feet to the fire. I would do it. Now, as a Celtics fan, people are being, apprehensive and scared. Oh, what happens if he leaves? What happens if he leaves? That's always a question. We just lost Marcus Smart. He was here for 9 years. That's always the issue. Watch the damn team. Try to enjoy Boston Celtics basketball for a change. Just try. Please.
Well, it's interesting because Corrales threw out there the question of the biggest recent what if. And yours was Game 7 against Miami. I think a lot of people's was. It's in recent memory. Tatum turns his ankle in the first play. Brown has probably the toughest night of his career, which I think set the tone for a lot of the discussion about him this summer. But I go back to Rob, March 2022, and that was the team that I really look at and say was head and shoulders above the league that year. They're rolling through 22-3 stretch into the spring. Best defense maybe ever. And he goes down and everything changed after that. And, when he came back, they were still effective in his minutes, but he wasn't quite the same guy and they weren't quite the same defense with him out there. And then, the whole thing gets thrown into a loop next September when Ime gets suspended and eventually fired. So that's still my big what if, because that really seemed like the moment. They're there in the championship. They got that 2-1 lead over the Warriors. That was the year where the whole conversation could have changed. And, everything could have changed. I don't know, depending on how the finals go last year. Maybe Smart's still here. I don't know about Grant. He's probably gone either way after the way last year went, whether they go to the finals or not. But that does become a seminal moment now, not only for Smart and the team, but also Brown, because I think it just sort of changed the conversation around him. One summer ago, when we were debating KD, I don't think a lot of Celtics fans wanted to move Brown. They were very defensive overall, just, taking the temperature of the fan base. I think people loved Brown, wanted to keep him, even though Durant was that enticing top-end, top 5-10 level player. People saw the upside with Brown. Then he comes out this year, All-NBA. Him and Tatum keep making that push on the all-time list of guys with 30 games, teammates, Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Shaq, Kobe.
Mm-hmm.
But then the playoffs come, things get tumultuous. They fall short again, and there's this real appetite for change. And, I felt it a little bit too. I started thinking and imagining some scenarios where they could shake this up a little bit. I didn't think the Smart route would be the way they'd go. But they keep in Brown, it looks like. Trade Smart, that's their way of shaking this up. And they're still going to trust that Tatum and Brown continue to grow. And I think that more than anything is going to decide where they're going, is how much these two, Brown specifically, can keep growing into a new deal here. Because he's going to have to keep growing.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at this last season, I think one of the things we have to keep in mind is that, of course, Ime is out. Like, when Ime got suspended last year, we had the discussion. I was like, no, Ime's gone. He's not coming back. I knew that. You can't do that as a Boston Celtic and expect to return. Not with this franchise, not with this history, not with the status that this franchise has in the league and in the city, town, metro area, New England, what have you. No. So I knew that Coach Mazzulla was going to be the coach going forward. I didn't care that there was an interim on his name. If you follow me on Twitter, I was just like, just call him the coach. He's the coach. Now
They start 21-5.
Yes. So the issue, Coach Mazzulla, 34-year-old rookie head coach, a staff that's not there for him. Half the staff is resentful that they got jumped over because they probably had tenure, and on top of that, more experience than he did, and he ends up being coach. So half that coaching staff was resentful, and the other half was like, we were here for Ime. He's supposed to be working with us. So you're dealing with that, right? Then on top
half those guys end up going to Ime in the end, which said a lot.
Exactly. And one of them ended up leaving for another coaching job before the season was up. So that lets you know exactly, Damon Stoudemire lets you know exactly what the situation was. When I think about the situation Coach Mazzulla stepped into and won 57 games as an inexperienced 34-year-old rookie head coach, I think of it like being you step into the beef, and it's not your kitchen, it's not your staff, it's not your menu. It's not even the type of food that have prepared yourself for your entire career to cook. But you make your way through, and then after that first year is over, you remodel that entire damn restaurant. You redo that whole kitchen. You change that staff. You get the wait staff you want, and now it's going to become the bear. And that's exactly what Coach Mazzulla is going through right now. He has a new coaching staff who are there for him and this team. He is forming a team. He and Brad are forming a team that's going to work the way he wants to play. Right? Look at the players that have been added. O'Shea Brissett, 6'7" swingman, tweener, wing.
Syracuse guy
who's very, very, very athletic, can hit shots, can finish, is a dunker.
I'm really excited about him.
In transition, right? Can defend multiple positions. Delano Banton, I don't know exactly what he's going to do because they say he's a point guard. I don't know how much of a point guard he is. To me, right. I see him as a swingman, a tweener, and a wing who can defend multiple positions. He can steal the ball. He can block shots. He can jump the passing lanes. He's athletic. He can run. He can finish. Okay? 6'7", Jordan Walsh, swingman, tweener, wing. Mainly a defensive guy, but he can disrupt things on defense, and that initiates offense. He can finish, he can run, and he's improved his three-point shooting, and it's going to get better, especially with the Boston Celtics staff. And then you have Jay Scrubb, who is a 6'5" guard, small forward, wing, who finished what I just said. It's some Mad Libs here. Same thing. So that is the kind of team, and these are the kind of players that Coach Mazzulla is looking to have, right? And then you add Kristaps Porzingis, who a lot of people are down on because they say he doesn't play a lot. He's always injured. But also, Kristaps Porzingis before now hasn't really had a lot to play for. He hasn't. We don't know how he plays in the clutch when it really matters. He hasn't had the opportunity yet. He hasn't. And the other part of Kristaps Porzingis, right? 7'3". He's not a center. Is he a power forward? Is he a small forward? He'll do what he does. But he is a matchup nightmare. He is an offensive threat. He can do so many things with the ball. He can handle the ball. Has he had teammates like the Jays before? Has he been in a franchise that's a stable with the Boston Celtics?
That was the one situation you probably compare it to, but a little different.
Has he been in a franchise that stables the Boston Celtics that win no matter how many times they have to pivot?
He might have actually been on the 3 most unstable organizations in the league.
Exactly. The Boston Celtics have a competent front office. They have a more than competent coaching staff, more than competent people in basketball operations. And it's with a stable franchise, with a team that has a core and guys in the locker room who are leaders. Okay? Now, we had 9 years of Marcus Smart. If you think that the time that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown were there with Marcus Smart in that locker room, that they haven't absorbed enough to it's their team now, and they should be leading it now, then I have a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. It's time for them to step up. They already know it. We don't need to tell them. We don't need to write articles about it. Just watch it happen, right? So when I look at this team right now, are they better? They're going to be the team that Joe Mazzulla probably wants out there to execute the game the way he wants to. Because, again, he was going into the kitchen cooking with somebody else's ingredients, with somebody else's menu, trying to make things happen.
And their game plan. And Grant talked a little bit about that. We'll get to Grant in just a second. But he did deserve the chance, I think, to show with a full summer, with his staff, with belief in the game plan. And that's what they need to have, I think, was a belief in this philosophy. And a lot gets talked about the offense, and I'm glad you brought up some of the length and all the different things they added this summer, because I do think he has a ideology on defense that I don't necessarily agree with, but did end the year number 2 on that end. And it's because of playing the percentages. They played a ton of drop, take away the rim. They really try to take away the 3-point shot from opponents. Length will help you do that. They switched a lot last year because it's what they did the year before. I don't think they'll switch as much this year. I think they'll lock in the positions a lot more. I think they'll try to keep guys on matchups. And that goes back to Jaylen, who I think has had a couple of rough years defensively here. I think he was one of the guys that the switching defense didn't come as naturally to. And he's talked about it too. Like, he likes to lock in on a matchup when he's been able to do that. He's played great defense in his career. And he is a great, long, versatile body when it comes to NBA defense. You would think that this guy would be one of the better defenders in the league. The last couple of years, it's slipped up a little bit. So I'm interested in seeing the kind of defense they play this year. A lot of it, I think, is going to be filling up space on the floor. Now, they're going to play a ton of zone. We saw it in Summer League. I found it interesting that they were trying that out with the Summer League crew. Maybe they'll try a little bit with this team this year just because of the personnel they have. But I think a lot of this bodes well for Jaylen on that end because I think it's going to be a style that suits him a little bit more. And if we're being real, the offense suited him pretty well last year. He didn't shoot well from 3, but he was the beneficiary of a lot of the pressure that came to the 3-point line, and he was able to cut and roll and do whatever to get shots close to the basket. And they let him shoot that mid-range too that was so deadly last year. So I like where this is going for him. I think he's going to be a good fit in this offense. He might have to get back to the corner a little bit just to make room for Porzingis in the middle of the floor. But this is going to be a good year for Porzingis, I think, for Brown, I think. And the question is the money going forward. But on the floor, I think this is a guy who's going to continue to get better. This is a guy I like for a number of different reasons. And I think it's probably going to use that game 7 as a little bit of fire into the future here. And again, like, we're always going to talk about the mix. We're always going to talk about Tatum and Brown's ability to play together. But the one thing I've always believed in is Brown's desire to not only improve and win, but also his ability to make it work. And he did play a role that was a little different for him the last couple of years to help this team win. And so I do think he deserves credit for that. Now, the contract, we'll see how that shakes out. His desires on and off the court, where he wants to be, that's a different game. But on the floor, like, there's just absolutely a relentless drive to get better. Now, there are weak spots in his game he needs to improve on: the dribbling, the passing, all the rest, and the defense, as I mentioned. But he's really become a machine offensively.
I mean, in terms of like Jaylen Brown having places in his game to improve, yeah. I mean, when you're 26, 27 in the NBA, yeah, that's the thing. You do have holes in your game and you have things you can improve on. Great. But when you can improve on things and get even better and you score 27 points a game the previous season, it's time to celebrate. Like, you should be cracking a cold one on your stoop over that. And I think that people don't understand how crazy they are when they talk about Jaylen Brown didn't do X, Y, and Z. Jaylen Brown couldn't do this. Jaylen Brown didn't do that. The man has played 105 playoff games since he entered the NBA. 105. And it would have been more if it weren't for the fact that he was injured and missed an entire playoffs, I think in 2021. So, like, people need to understand that guy has more playoff experience than a man who was a 15-year veteran who just won a championship in Jeff Green, and he's not even near 30. He needs to improve his handles. I've seen that man do some amazing things with his handles on the basketball court. Now, when we're talking about the playoffs, when people are centered on you and it's the best defenders in the league and they don't want you to kill them, yeah. If you're holding the ball in a situation when everybody's going to be swiping at the ball, in crunch time, yeah. Like, Jaylen Brown has done X, Y, and Z. Jaylen Brown's been in that situation multiple times in the last how many years? And everybody who's critiquing him was doing what? Watching him from home on TV. Players who were critiquing him were in Cancun watching him play deep into the postseason again. So when you have that level and now you can improve on that, Let's go. Now, the issue is that a lot of people think that this is as good as Jaylen can get. I do not agree with that. Do you think that that's as good as Jason Tatum can get? I don't think so. Jason Tatum scored 30 points, and it annoys me that people say Jason Tatum was the first Celtic to score 30 points a game. Larry Bird scored 29.9, and it was like a matter of 8 points over the entire season. He scored 30 a game, all right? I saw the season. I was there. I was alive. I was outside. But the thing is that if you think that Jason Tatum, the most he can score a game is 30, or you think the most Jaylen Brown could score a game is 26.6, but now the question is, will they adjust their game to allow for Porzingis to come in and be a big scorer too? Is Porzingis going to be a guy scoring between 20 and 22, or is he going to drop down to 18 and 19, and then the Jay score more, or is it going to be more balanced in the offense? Now, one of the things was those two guys were the focus of the offense, and then you hoped that you got scoring by committee from other people, and it was spread out, But Porzingis is going to be a guy who allows for the Jays to do so much more. He's 7'3". He can handle the rock. He can shoot. He can drive. He can finish at the rim. He can catch alley-oops, And then on top of that, you're going to have a healthy Rob Williams. You're going to have the ageless wonder Al Horford. Now, after that, I'd like to see Sam Hauser have another season where he's doing amazing things and shooting and scoring. But I want to see Sam Hauser be effective in the postseason. Sam Hauser was not able to be effective.
No, he didn't show up. No.
No.
And your rotation's always going to get a little tighter, but
yeah,
if there's an injury or whatever it might be, you do need guys like that to step up in that case.
Sam Hauser is 6'8", and he's a surprisingly good defender. He doesn't get killed when they have him on the court, So I was disappointed that, Hauser wasn't able to be out there and contribute more. And, Grant Williams, he pretty much was out of the lineup for a lot of times until, we absolutely needed him. And then, Coach Mazzulla was like, this is your opportunity to step up and play, right? But
I do want to get to Grant in just a second here.
Yeah.
Making his rounds. Real quick, just to wrap this Jaylen thing, he did appear at this park in Dorchester today, refurbishing it, gave a short speech. As I said, he's been all over the place, putting in work with the NBPA this summer, as well as, in New York on ABC News, talking about the Juice Foundation, the clothing line he's using to fund some of his, social efforts here, education efforts. He's been pretty active in Boston from the time he's been here. And, people are going to debate what this means for his future. I know he had a few vague comments in here that I don't think really have much sway in either direction. But one thing that's been talked about when it comes to his future is his desire to, be involved in stuff off the court, make an impact off the court. And he has been able to do that pretty effectively here, obviously through the local colleges and then just being in the community as a whole here. And I think that's a good sign in the sense that he has been able to find ways to build his business here and make an impact here. Now, he's expressed frustration on that sense too. And I don't think we've kicked around those comments he made to the, I think it was to the New York Times, those specifically, about how he's felt kind of blockage in the city, like a pushback against what he's doing or an inability to do it at the level he wants to. And so those are some of the factors people talk about when it comes to his future here, is his connection with the city, his ability to accomplish what he wants to accomplish off the court here, and those type of things.
I mean, being a Black Bostonian, I deal with those same things. I deal with those same things, the pushback from trying to get things to happen in the community, trying to get signage on buildings that should be historical landmarks in my neighborhood. Due to gentrification, people walk past them every day and don't realize that these have a massive significance to the Black and Latino population of the city, or acknowledging the Black and Latino population of the city. So I totally understand where Jaylen's coming from. Now, I think that there are a lot of people that get up in arms and get kind of trepidatious when he says these things. he's not saying anything that isn't true that anybody who hasn't lived here their entire lives doesn't already know about and has experienced these same things. So for him to vocalize it isn't a knock. I've lived here my entire life. I fight every day to change these things. These are the same things that Bill Russell talked about. Same thing that anybody with any level of intelligence would discuss openly about what needs to change in the city. Because things don't change in the city until you say these things need to change in the city. Otherwise, the status quo continues status quoing. And that's not what we want. We want progress. We want actual forward progress. And the way that happens is to fight for it, to vocalize it, to make it known it needs to happen. And that's what Jaylen's doing. And again, when it comes to the fans, anything they perceive as being negative, oh God, oh, does he want to stay? Does he want to stay? Do I want to stay? I've been here 48 years. I'm going to die here. You know? So, of course, he's going to talk about the issues that he faces. He wants to do more. He wants to do more. He wants to provide more for the community. I want to see him do it. I'd like to help him do it. If he stays here long enough, it's going to happen. You think that anybody who had a foundation, whether we're talking about when Antoine Walker had a foundation, the Real Deal Foundation, whether we're talking about the things that Paul Pierce wanted to do, Eric Williams, anything, they had to deal with the same type of situation, about getting, help and wanting more and to do this and have a bigger grant and all these other things and reach out. Like when I think about the things that he's been able to do, already, it's amazing. And again, he's nowhere near 30. Well, if you round up, yeah. Think about what this man will accomplish by the time he's 30 and up, 30 and 32 in the city. And you know why it'll happen? Because he verbalized that he wanted to do more. I'd much rather have somebody talk about they want to do more and they were blocked from doing more as opposed to completely retracting and being withdrawn and just waiting for their time to be up so they can bounce. This is a positive thing.
So there you have it. Let's go to Grant because he did a couple interviews over the week here. JJ Redick, I think Theo Pinson, who used to play for the Maine Celtics, I think he's in Dallas now. So he's been talking about his exit from Boston. He's talked quite a bit already. He got interviewed by The Athletic. I ran into him in Vegas, wasn't able to get him. Bummer, but he's said a lot, and I think he said a lot throughout this year. I think he had a frustrating year, and it ultimately made sense for both sides here. As the Globe reported that they separated. Grant wanted to play more. Dallas gave him a fully guaranteed contract. The Celtics were looking to have incentives involved in it, and he talked a little bit about Joe Mazzulla, what went down last year, the spat with Jimmy Butler, and all the rest here in these podcasts. But first, I want to tell people quickly about our sponsor, great sponsor here for the network, FanDuel, FanDuel.com/Boston. You know the URL at this point. Go get $200 in bonus bets when you head over there. And that's still the offer. The MLB season's still rolling. They're an official partner of MLB. And as our official sports wagering partner here, you can bet on everything from baseball games each night, futures, some of the same game parlays are always great, and NBA futures available right now as well. Celtics right up there with the Nuggets as NBA favorites next year. So go get $200 in bonus bets. Everything from money line, over under, who's going to hit the first home run, and it's on an app that's safe, secure, super easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. No better place to bet MLB than FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com/Boston and get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. Of course, go to Gambling Helpline, ma.org, or 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support if you sense you have an issue with gambling. All right, Dart, let's talk Grant. So Grant's a guy I liked for a long time here, even through some of his struggles. Didn't have the most consistent first 2 years here, a great third year. Last year was weird, fell out of the rotation late. Didn't really get back into it in the playoffs until Malcolm Brogdon got hurt. And I thought played well when he got his spot opportunities here. I think he was a favorite of Ime, not as much with Joe. And that leads to his departure. I mean, if he wasn't going to play here, the Celtics weren't going to pay him. And he wasn't going to stay. And, they ended up with a sign and trade here that got them 3 seconds. I don't know how much you heard. He talked about a ton in these podcasts, as well as Joe's coaching style. He's always pretty, I think, political in his comments, deliberate in his comments, not trying to rock the boat too much. But you always do sense a little bit of frustration on how things went down here, understandably, losing his role and, not able to be part of this team going forward. So what do you make of the Grant trade?
I think Grant Williams is a consummate professional. He's been very diplomatic in what he said about what happened last season, and I think the same could be said for Marcus Smart. The thing is that Marcus Smart and Grant Williams were perfect for Celtics under what Ime Udoka was trying to do with the team and his philosophy. They didn't exactly fit under what Coach Joe Mazzulla wanted to do. That's why neither one of them is still on the team. Marcus Smart is, not missing any words, the heart and soul of the Boston Celtics as we know them. Okay? Grant Williams was probably, right under them. When the Celtics were getting, as he quoted, pumped by the Miami Heat in the playoffs, he stood up and he went toe-to-toe with Jimmy Butler. Jimmy Butler scored 8 points in the final stretch. He talked about this in a recent podcast. He scored 10. He was doing the scoring.
Yeah, Grant was hitting threes.
Yeah, he was doing the scoring. And he's the one drawing with Jimmy Butler. But the thing is that they got contributions from 2 other guys that we didn't expect them to, and the Celtics ended up losing, right? Grant Williams had his role. He filled his role. He wasn't consistent enough at it, and he's no longer a Boston Celtic. When you look at Grant Williams and you look at how he's built and look at his game and look at how he plays, the tenacity, the ferocity, the stick-to-itiveness, guarding multiple positions at undersized at 6'6", not very long, not super athletic, but athletic enough. But it's will and determination. And also, he's very cerebral, really smart guy. And he understands basketball. But he just wasn't the guy he needed to be. And again, when I ran down who the Celtics have gotten, 6'7", long, athletic, wing people that can run, guard multiple positions, and finish at the rim. Their body types are the polar opposite of Grant Williams. Grant Williams is often put in as a 6'6" guy being pretty much another center. We're not going to see that happen again, And Marcus Smart is 6'3", 6'4"-ish, doing things. You look at Delano Banton, who is not the player Marcus Smart isn't as clutch as Marcus Smart isn't the defender Marcus Smart is, but can be disruptive much in the same way. If you have Brissett, you have Banton, you have Walsh and Scrub just doing little things, in the rotation, you hope that by committee they can do what one Marcus Smart can do, but not as a leader. But we already have the 2 guys who are supposed to be leading this team. They're supposed to be taking over this franchise, And
no, it's going to be thinner building around 3 stars, and hopefully those guys can break through. You're hoping that because you do have to go with minimum signings and such now that you're right up against the new apron here. You can't get a mid-level guy, so you end up with a Banton and Brissett and all the rest here. But it's going to be on White. It's going to be on Porzingis.
Yes,
to replace those guys. And they want to consolidate around more consistent guys. And White was very consistent last year. Smart had an up and down year around injury and all the rest. Yes. And I think people started to feel that White was the better option overall there, and they felt that way too, obviously. And Porzingis, there's no question there. He's better than Grant if healthy. But I still look at Grant as a depth guy. And, I'm sure they'll deal with some injuries during the year. There's a leadership component here too. But I still go back to, yes, Brissett, could have a solid year, could be a diamond in the rough along with Banton, who's, going to have to compete for his spot, it looks like, on a not partially guaranteed deal here. But Grant came out 2 years ago, and he's shot close to 40% from 3 for a couple years now, which isn't easy to do. and he came out in a game 7, hit 7, 8 threes, won that game. That's not something I don't think we've seen any Celtics role guy ever do. I mean, that's one of a kind performance there. That's not easy to do, and I think that is something they missed during the playoffs when he wasn't playing. And I think it is something they'll miss going forward, is just the upside of his role contributions, because he did a few things well: switch, shoot threes. He wasn't the most consistent player,
No.
but when it came to those things, those few things he did really well, I think you could almost always bank on him doing those things. And a lot of people have criticized the defense last year. I don't think he played consistently enough to really get a good sense for it. And as we talked about, they played a different kind of system last year.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like they're losing something with him. I don't think it's going to hit as hard as some of the intangibles Smart, that they're losing in Smart, rather. This
And
guy is obviously more replaceable. But losing them both together, I think, like, you're going to walk into that locker room next year, and there's just, if Blake's not there, whoever, some of these other more vocal guys, it's going to be a little quieter in there. You're going to notice how quiet it is, because
yeah,
these guys were just talking nonstop.
I also think it has a lot to do with like more of the fans and their feeling and their perception. Marcus Smart was he was the consummate Boston Celtic. He was the Celtic. He was the guy that the entire community and the fandom embraced, warts and all. If you talk to different sports writers and talk to people that cover the NBA, and that is just something that we lost 9 years. When the Celtics had Marcus Smart, they were winning again, because before that things were pretty dark, right? So, but then when you look at it from this perspective, this team is going to be more the squad that Joe Mazzulla wanted to coach and wanted to implement the things that he wanted to do. And we're not finished because, again, man, we haven't figured out where Peyton Pritchard's going. We have this weird guard situation with J.D. Davison, Jan Madar, Yuan Begarin, that's going to pop up at some point that we're going to have to address,
Yeah, into the
Um,
future. I think Pritchard's the plan going forward, but we'll see.
and then there's the big situation, right? You got Cornette and Cabangele. Cabangele, I prayed was going to be more of a contributor, because I thought he would have been like Rob Williams Jr. when I saw the things that he did in summer league, that previous summer league. Then I
He
saw
was a little short. That killed it, because he had a motor. He could
Mhm.
hit the three a little bit. He's a physical guy, but I think he was only like 6'8", 6'7", 6'8". So that's what killed him, is guys could really shoot over him. He actually played for the Hawks in the summer league, so I think he's gone at this point.
Yeah. When I looked at what he did in the 2 summer leagues ago, and then I saw what he did in the G League, but when he came down to the Celtics and they put him on the court, he looked like lost. Like he looked like he ran out of turbo, and I was just like,
Yeah.
I was very disappointed. I was like, he's not the guy.
Yeah,
Because
no, that's the other thing, right? Because Horford's aging, and they kind of need that big of the future. And maybe that's Porzingis now, and Rob's still relatively young. But, that versatile modern five, and, they didn't use Grant at the 5 a ton, but he could guard fives, and he could draw fives out of the paint if they were guarding him. So you
he,
don't really have that younger protege of Horford. I think Grant called himself a mini Al at times.
Mhm. Yeah, like he could guard fives because he had to. That's
Yeah.
how I say it, right? And again, Grant Williams, once we switched over from Ime Udoka to Coach Mazzulla, it was his days were numbered. Mene Tekel Parson, was written on the wall for that man. And
Right.
unfortunately, I feel like under that scrutiny, knowing that, Grant just didn't have a solid second half of the season, because he kind of didn't know. I think he didn't know. Scratch that. He knew he was on the outside looking in. He knew he wasn't one of Coach Mazzulla's favorite guys, and I think that kind of played in that. He kind of tried harder and he pushed himself, and I think he kind of played himself out of his rotation spot.
Right. And I read an article, I think one of the Dallas papers, where he talked about, I want to be a playmaker. I want to be a guy who can set some other players up on this team. And that's really not what the Celtics want him to do. Even Ime, I remember, would say, like, we want you to do a narrow role and we want you to do it well. And I think
Yeah.
Grant always had that desire, and he talked about in these podcasts too, to do a little bit more. But he talked a lot about Joe. And, he praised him, said he was different, understands he has that eye for offense, and that's really what he emphasizes, and that different coaches emphasize different things.
Mhm.
And so I actually saw Grant talking to Ime, down at Summer League. I think they had a pretty good relationship. I think a lot of these players had good relationships with Ime and really came to trust what he did because, of course, they went to the finals on his
Yeah.
game plan. So that's still a dynamic going forward that I find interesting. I think Smart was a big Ime guy. Tatum keeps in touch with him, but he's, I think one of Joe's biggest proponents. And, Jaylen, I don't know. But that's changed from the defensive identity to the offensive identity was pretty drastic last year. And I think it, shook this team up at times, like how different their focus was this year. And the offense, made big progress. The defense played a little bit more inconsistently here. And,
Yeah.
you're going to try to work these things out here. But when it comes to Joe, they really believe in him. And, he's unproven. He's a guy who came off the back of the bench. He's a guy who doesn't have great NBA experience so far
I
and
mean,
didn't play in the NBA, of course, either. But they really believe in him to the point where, as you've said, players who don't fit under his system are now gone. They gave him the extension. And as Brian Windhorst said on his podcast, they're doubling down on his ideology of offense over
I mean,
defense.
they kind of should. The man, okay, I need to just stress this. A 34-year-old, I've said this before, rookie head coach who was using a staff that half of them didn't want to be there and resented him being there, with players in the team that were not to his, specific, what he wanted to do. He didn't pick these players. These are not his ingredients. This is not his menu. This is not the kitchen designed to his specifications. That man won 68 games as a head coach. And he should have won more, but he didn't due to inexperience. All right? He won 68 games. Do you know the only other coach to win more games than him? The man who won the NBA championship. And the way that he won 69. He had to win 16 to win the championship. Okay? So, and then again, the Boston Celtics were down 3-0 in the ECF in the finals. They had a 7th game at home. They were running on fumes in that game 7, but they didn't lay down and die. All right? When you don't want to play for a coach, when you want your season to end, when you just want to pack it up, you stop playing. The Lakers died in game 4. The Celtics fought to the bitter end. It was ugly, but they fought to the bitter end. And you don't do that for a coach that you don't trust and you don't believe in it. And in terms of like how Jaylen feels, if you let that man win, put him in a position to play well, and their stability, and you seem to be a stand-up guy, like you stand up for what you believe in, you don't like cower, and I think that Jaylen respects Joe Mazzulla, regardless of his age, because that man was put into a situation that was not ideal. And look what he did. We're talking about when in the history of the NBA have you seen a 34-year-old first-time head coach do what this guy did? Like, and what did this fandom do? Complain because they should have won 60-plus games.
Right. Expectations are high, though, rightfully.
Expectations are high, but then there's reality. Then there's common sense. And this fandom doesn't seem to be able to toe the line and be able to do both. They want everything. They want every game to be won by 25. They want the Celtics to sweep every team on a West Coast road trip. They want everybody to stay healthy all the time. It's not going to happen. Anytime there's any type of adversity, Celtics fans all seem to just like fall apart. Adversity is what an 82-game season is built on. Life is built on adversity. It's about how you recover from the adversity, and then again, sometimes the regular season doesn't go the way you want it to, and then the postseason goes another way. It happened to the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat were trash this season. The Lakers were trash this season. But then they had some tweaks. They did some things that figured some stuff out, and they did it in the playoffs when it mattered the most.
Yeah,
That's
and he's gonna get better. I find it interesting though, and they talk a lot about this. He's learning, he's growing. There's obviously potential they see in him, and the comparison some people make is Spoelstra, who started very young, who had these kind of doubts, who came up in a situation under Pat Riley there where everyone was saying like, oh, the old guy was so much better and this and that.
remember Spo's first postseason. Remember how that ended? So I'm gonna say. And
Yeah,
who did he lose to his first postseason? Spoelstra.
So this is what I ask is there something here? Is there an ideology? Is there philosophy? Is there something they see in him that they really want to see through that they think could benefit them long term? Because in the short term, they have a lot of stakes right now, right? They got these two young stars, they got big expectations. And coming out of year one to hear, yeah, he's growing, he's learning, he's making mistakes, and he's learning from them. I don't think people want to hear that because they're in such a high stakes position.
I
But
never want to hear it.
but if he can grow into something special, especially in a reasonable amount of time here, I think that's when people are going to look back on and say, oh, And again, Utah wanted to hire this guy. Danny Ainge wanted to hire this guy, and he actually made some comments, I think, to the Globe last year that he thinks Joe's better than Ime, personally, and they may.
Something to think about. Brad Stevens was a young coach that people were very high on. They saw what he did. They saw he had this vision, right? If Brad Stevens believes in this guy and Danny Ainge, the guy who's managed to fleece the entire NBA multiple times over and rebuild and retool different franchises over and over again, you see what he's done in Utah. If they believe in this guy, then what the hell is wrong with the fandom? What are they not seeing?
Well, at this point, he's tied himself to Joe because they've picked Joe over multiple guys. They have some assistants here that potentially, if things go sideways, these are some really good assistants that they could turn to if things don't go well going forward.
Yeah.
But they've committed pretty heavily to Joe. So Joe's going to have to improve next year. He's going to have to take those steps, and he's going to have to show, I think, that this system works. Because, again, last year, lots of wins, as you mentioned. They get to the East Finals. They almost come back. But, the fans, they want to see a step forward. And I think last year, it was a small step back. I think it was, and again, there were reasons for that. I think a lot of the excuses were valid. But now there's the full summer, there's the assistants, there's the team, as you mentioned, that befits him. And, a couple of the things Grant said, did a good job taking things on his head, trying to take the blame. As players, we could have helped. Ime was a little bit more player empowering, would trust guys, and when they saw something, he'd ask, and he'd roll with that. Joe had more of dictating the matchups and doing ththings his way. So there's got to be a mix of both. Players have the communication ability to be like, hey, we don't think this is working. Then you got to figure it out on that side of the ball. And, he thought that was why there was less connectivity last year, was just a change in philosophy. And now, there'll be adjustment to that. There'll be the personnel for that. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting. I think it's fair. I think it was fair to bring him back. I think it's fair to give him this extra chance. But I also think the criticism was valid last year.
It was valid because it was his first year,
Yeah.
learning on the job. He was thrust into the fire. He was baptized as a baptism by fire. He was just thrust into the position, and he took it on running. That says a lot for him. And then on top of that, right, we have a full summer to implement all the things you want to do. To put that philosophy in place. And also, when we talk about trusting the players, Joe Mazzulla did something, in my opinion, that was all about trusting the players. He knew who he had on the court. He knew that these players knew each other. He knew they knew the game. And he didn't call unnecessary timeouts. He's like, you guys can figure it out. You guys can right the ship. This is a team that comes back. You guys can communicate with each other. When you have guys like Al Horford, Marcus Smart, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown on the court, who have played so many games together, have been in the fire together, have been in the postseason together, have had so many incredible comebacks, have had to deal with teammates and situations, and they made it through, and still were resilient enough to still win at the end of the day when it was all said and done. Okay, if you guys can make it through that, I'm pretty sure you can figure out this 8-0 run that this team's going on, or you can figure out this defense that they're doing. I don't need to call a timeout and tell you guys what to do. So when I think about that, Joe Mazzulla absolutely trusted this team. Now, did he dictate matchups, do a whole bunch of other stuff that they weren't familiar with? Sure. Is he going to do that going forward? I don't think so. I think he's going to switch and do what works. If it doesn't
I'm interested in that.
If it doesn't work, I'm more than sure that Joe Mazzulla is going to stop doing what doesn't work, because people that try to do the same thing and it fails, that is the definition of what? Insanity. And I believe that guy is pretty smart, and I think that he'll listen when somebody brings something to his attention that isn't working, and I think he'll actually listen to the players, because the players ain't that much. The age difference isn't that much from him, and I think that the staff that he has in place are going to help aid with that. And if there's any issues that the players have with him, I'm pretty sure they can hash it out with that man. I'm more than sure. I think Ime was a different person. Ime is a different guy. Ime is a different person, different coach, everything. He's not Ime Udoka. He's Joe Mazzulla. Let him be Joe Mazzulla. Let this team grow with him. Let them figure out what they need to figure out. And let's just watch this next season and see how it goes. This team isn't done. Okay? It's not done. It can't be. They don't have a lot of wiggle room. They don't have a lot of maneuverability. But right. This roster isn't done. And then I'm going to wait to see how this thing plays out in the regular season. Because if you're going to go into this regular season expecting 55 wins, 60 wins, what have you, throw that out. We'll figure out what it is, sometime in the first quarter of the season. We'll figure out what this team is and how they play. And then the more important thing is, how do they match up with teams in the postseason? And then there's going to be a whole lot of new wrinkles thrown into this new season with these mini tournaments and what have you.
Tournament, yeah.
Yeah.
So you bring up two things I want to hit on quick, and we got to get to Porzingis before we get out of here. Sure. First, Factor Meals, just got my big box in the mail, and it really is perfect for this time of year, summertime. You run around, you're in and out of the house, you don't have a ton of time to cook, and it's too hot to cook. So Factor Meals going to send you up to over 34 chef-prepared, dietitian-approved weekly options featuring premium ingredients such as broccolini, truffle butter, asparagus, and more. Ton of add-ons, snacks, breakfast options, egg bites, potato, bacon, egg, breakfast skillet. So many different options here, and I love the shakes. The shakes are my favorite part by far. They sent me a bunch of those, some of my favorite I've ever had, and I'm definitely going to be ordering some more of these because they're done in 2 minutes. Throw them in the microwave, 2 minutes, boom, it's out, you're eating, and then you're on the go again. I'm actually about to throw one in right after I get off of here. So factormeals.com/garden50 is going to get you 50% off your first box when you head over there. That's code garden50 at factormeals.com, America's /1 ready-to-eat meal kit. That's Factor Meals, FACTOR MEALS/garden50 and get 50% off your first box when you head over there. Ton of options. Check out the shakes. You won't regret it. And let's get to Porzingis. So, Dart, watch Porzingis over the years, as you said, coming from 3 teams that haven't been the steadiest organizations over his career. So what intrigues me, the shooting is the real deal. You watch this guy, he hits insane shots. And one thing I do hear from, people around the NBA about the Celtics, maybe the biggest point of praise for them and that they're only going to get better with this move, is they're a tough shot hitting team. You'll come out of a game feeling like you played great defense and their players just hit ridiculous shots and that won them the game. And Porzingis is going to do that. I mean, this guy's pulling up from half court a lot of the time and draining it. Post-up presence, something they were missing last year. Now, is that something Joe's going to embrace? Not really something they did at all last year. Not really a modern piece of basketball, but something he did well a year ago. I'm interested to see that. And the real deal is the defense. Perfect drop center, maybe the best drop center you could get for the system that they're playing, just standing back, protecting the rim, blocking shots, and, rotating around them. So those things make a lot of sense. Younger center with some upsides that his best basketball is still in front of him. A guy who's grown and gotten better coming off a career year. And a third star to pair with the other two. So you're able to form a rare big three. I think there's only really two in basketball right now at this level. So I get why they did it. If this hits, it's going to hit tremendously, and they're going to have a staggering talent advantage over the opposing teams. But there's injury concerns, there's fit concerns, and, I think also him being a guy who's been a star on a lot of the teams is going to be adjustment, given that he's going to have to play under Tatum and maybe even Brown here. Those two are going to have to balance things out here. So how do you look at him? How do you see him fitting? And does he make the Celtics better than they were a year ago?
I don't know if he makes the Celtics better than they were a year ago. He's going to make them different than they were a year ago. He's a matchup nightmare. He can do so many things offensively. He can make life so much easier for Brown and Tatum, potentially. When you have a guy that big that can do that many things with the ball, score the ball, shoot, ridiculous range, handle the rock, is a willing passer. And this is another thing. People never got to see what he played like with different kinds of teammates, with a different kind of setting, with a team with a different defensive, profile, with different coaching, and again in a stable environment. He hasn't played a significant amount of games in a season yet. Why? What did he have to do on the court? How much energy did he have to exert? How much was he asked to do in those seasons that pretty much could have lent to him not being on the court more than 64 games in a year? I feel like if you're playing on a team with Tatum, Brown, and some of these other cats, and the way they play, the style they play, he might spend more time playing. He might have to, and if the Celtics play well, he's not going to have to spend the entire game on the court. There are a whole lot of different factors that people aren't really considering. This is a unique situation for Kristaps Porzingis. So when you think about what he did previously, throw it out. I understand people thinking, okay, this is what he's done in the past, so we're going to project that to the future. Throw it out. This team is going to have such a different look. It's going to be dangerous in a different way on offense. It's going to allow for people to do more things. But like you were calling him a center. Like in my brain, I can't process him being a center.
Just because of the shooting?
Well, because of his play style.
Yeah.
When I think of a center, I still think of Al Horford or Rob Moore as a center than him.
Yeah.
To me, I don't care that he's 7'3". When I see him, he's a small power forward. But he can't be a small power forward if you're going to have Jaylen playing there, See what I'm saying?
It's going to be interesting, right? Because I think their plan is to start Rob and Porzingis together. And Rob's a guy who's going to play closer to the rim, who's going to roll. And Porzingis, I think, I don't want to say he's going to be shooting exclusively threes, but he's going to be shooting a lot of threes to make this work.
I think he's going to be spending a lot of time in the paint, and he's going to be shooting threes. I think he's going to be able to get shots because of the players on the court, and I think that the players on the court are going to be able to get shots because of Porzingis. And I think it's going to open up a lot of things for Rob to do and Al to do and any of these wings that I've listed. And I think that they might be able to create some level of chaos on the defense that gets them out. I
love his fit defensively. I do.
That gets them out in the transition because I fully believe that one of the things that Joe Mazzulla wants to do is make this team somebody that just grinds you into the dirt and then just tires you out to the point where they're just scoring on you in a myriad of ways. And I think that the way the Boston Celtics were constructed before, they had a different defensive philosophy. And I think there's going to be offense first, then the defense on top of the offense. And you want grit, you want toughness. And I feel like Joe Mazzulla is like, we're going to have a different kind of toughness. It's not going to look like, it's not going to present the way it did before.
That's a
And
great
I
point.
think the fans are going to have to be open and receptive to it. And I'm just afraid that looking at the past few seasons that this Celtics fandom is looking for things in a different manner that they're going to appear, and they're not going to appreciate it immediately. I'm able to throw out all my preconceived notions and all my expectations and just watch what the Celtics do. And I feel like it's going to be successful. How successful? I don't know. The Celtics fans want a championship. Only one team wins a title out of the 30 every year. The Denver Nuggets won it last year. Did anybody pick them before the season started? No. So just watch the season and just be Celtics fans. Please. Let's do that. Let's try that.
That's the one thing I'm going to sit back, watch, and see this whole thing play out with
Mhm.
Porzingis, because there's a world where this is just a grand slam, and this is that final piece they needed to turn this into a championship team. And it wasn't quite KG for a bunch of reasons, but sitting at that press conference, they got it down on the court, probably their biggest acquisition since, depending on how you look at Kyrie. It was a big deal. The 7-3 guy comes walking in off this great year. Looks like he's going to be a big three-piece along with the other two wings. They were missing a lot of offense at that center spot last year, and I'll call him a center again. They didn't have a pressure on the rim, and they didn't have a big guy on defense, like a 7-3 guy. So those are two areas of weakness on last year's team, because teams would shoot over Horford in that drop. Teams would, be able to easily take the rim away from Tatum and Brown because they didn't have that rim pressure. He could really solve those two things, not to mention being the 3-point threat he is, which is really going to hurt Giannis and Embiid, those guys who want to camp out in the paint rather than go out and guard this guy.
All he needs to do is give us between 18 and 20 a game, and you could get 30 or 32 from Jason, and you could get 25 to 28 from Jaylen. If they get 25, 28, and you get 20 or more from Kristaps Porzingis, that's insane. Now you have to start thinking about what's Derek White gonna do. When we get Brogdon back, how's that gonna work? And then we have all these versatile wings that can, finish and defend, guard, possibly cut to the basket, score, get offensive rebounds, get second shot opportunities. Be disruptive on the defensive end. This can go well, or it can be a huge disappointment. I'm going to reserve judgment, but I think the fans, they just want to see a championship. They don't care about anything else. And I think there's a whole lot of middle ground there, man. Like, there's a whole lot of middle ground there.
He's Dart Adams, as always, one of the more prolific tweeters about the Celtics, and also brilliant journalist, historian, and all the rest. Got a new piece in NPR about Boston as a hip-hop hub. Anything else cooking? Anything else to look forward to coming along?
So I recently collaborated with this French magazine to do a whole piece about Boston and Boston basketball. I collaborated with a journalist from France who was for Le Monde newspaper, and we did an article about Boston Celtics basketball and basketball culture. I'm working with there's going to be some high level Boston Celtics content that's going to come to you in 2024. Working on that with some great people, and yeah, just doing a bunch of writing. We're about to approach the 30th anniversary of the passing of Reggie Lewis, and me and my boys, Boston Legends, we're going to be re-releasing a bunch of Boston uniforms, jerseys, shorts, very, very soon. So everything's happening right now.
Yeah, the 90s were 30 years ago now, unbelievably.
Yeah.
um, yeah, I'm glad you bring up the France thing. I don't think people realize just the fever of Celtics fans overseas. I saw it in Spain,
Mhm.
France. Our guy Timmy there does the highlights from Poland. I mean, all over the world, there's just Celtics fever. And I think the most intense Celtics fans, there's a lot of them in Boston, but there are much more overseas who grew up on Bird and, seen him play in Madrid or whatever it might be. It's intense over there. And, they are passionate. And that's one thing I want to kick around with, O'Shea. And I knew him from college. And I don't think people understand really coming to Boston and playing for the Celtics is not only like the internet thing, like the fan base online is just wacky, weird, and
Mhm.
intense.
And the
And all
hatred.
the yes, there's that for sure. But then there's also just like internationally, you're just going to become so renowned because of the amount of people that root for this team from abroad and do it at such a level where they're rooting for the 8th guy, the 10th guy, even the 15th guy on the roster. And I
Yeah.
think that's always going to shock guys who join this team for the first time because it's different with other
Yeah.
teams. It really is.
When you
But
see the support Luke Cornett gets, you're like, wait a minute.
all right, he's Dart Adams. Good as always talking to you, Dart. We'll continue to follow along. Follow him on Twitter at Dart_Adams. See what he has coming out on the Reggie Lewis front and all the rest. And we'll talk to you again here soon, hopefully, Dart. See you when the season comes around, which will be sooner rather than later.
Can't wait to quote Bart Scott.
All right, and a word from one more sponsor before we get out of here. Stay tuned. You are not going to want to miss one of our favorites here, AG1. New name, new site. It's drinkag1.com. Go check them out. Go get their offer. You know it by now, but just in case you forgot. All right, our next partner is AG1, the daily foundational nutrition supplement that supports whole body health. I drink it every day. 75 high quality ingredients that give me all the nutrients, energy, focus, strength, and clarity I need every day to hit the ground running. If a comprehensive solution is what you need for your supplement routine, then try AG1. You get a free year supply of vitamin D, 5 free travel packs of AG1 with your first purchase. Just go to drinkag1.com/garden. Make sure you hit that. drinkag1.com/garden. Check it out. That's AG1. All right, that's our show. We'll be back again live with the whole crew next week. Maybe we'll have a Jaylen extension to kick around. Maybe we will not. If not, I'm sure there's still going to be some loose ends to tie up with the Celtics offseason. I want to dive into some of the new players with people who watch them. Of course, we had a recent episode with Caitlin Cooper where we kicked around O'Shea Brissett's impact. I want to do the same with folks on the Dallas side, folks on the Washington side with Porzingis, and see what he's going to bring at a deeper level from guys who watched him closely in recent years. Of course, maybe Delano Banton down the line as well, though. Again, he's on a non-guaranteed deal now. I don't think it's as certain that he's going to make the team. I think he'll make the team, but also play a big role in it going forward. Also looking forward to seeing Peyton Pritchard out with Team USA, going to be part of their preparation process for FIBA next month. And speaking of Porzingis, he will be playing for his country next month, Latvia, in the World Cup. I know people get nervous about that after how things went last year, but, really big deal for him, a big deal for a lot of the players from overseas. And so we'll be able to see what kind of shape he's in, what he's looking like, get a few, games from him to talk about into August, because once August is, there's really not going to be a lot of fresh topics to kick around. I know one thing Jimmy wanted to throw out there as a fresh topic, my performance in my opener, second game of the season this summer. Finally got back into my rec league this summer. A little rusty off Vegas, as you can see. A little, uh, I think after, probably close to a year since my first organized basketball here, a little winded, but played aggressive, as I told Jimmy. I was happy with that. One of our viewers emphasized people are ignoring the 8 rebounds, 3 blocks. And overall grittiness of this effort, 3 fouls as well. I didn't like 2 of the calls, but I'm not a big complainer. And I will mention, just because I want to clarify 2 things. The other team had 6 guys. It was 6-on-6. I don't know what happened with the box score down there, but this was not a 5-on-4 game. Number 2, I don't think I shot 26 shots, but if I did, because of putback tries or whatever it might have been, I definitely was out there close to 40 minutes. I wasn't jacking 26 shots in 22 minutes. So want to clarify that. I'll keep you guys up to date through the summer if you really want to know how my performance is going. But again, first game back in a while, I was really happy with how aggressive I was. And we won. We obviously had a massive lead, as you saw, 17.5. Got outscored by 13 in the second half and had to, steal it off for 3 throws, long pass down the court, kicked it to a teammate, and we got a layup that kind of iced the game. So that was that. We're 2-0. That's all I care about. All right. That's our show. We'll see you next week. Enjoy the weekend. Enjoy the rest of your summer. And once again, I'm Bobby Mann. This has been the Garden Report. Thanks to Dart Adams. Thanks to drinkag1.com/garden. Thanks to factormeals.com/garden50. Go check them out. I'm actually about to have some of that right now. And, of course, our official sports wagering partner, FanDuel. That's fanduel.com/Boston.